surrounding McCandless's case, the pool and researches for clues to the mystery of his untimely death. Digging deeply, he also unravels the larger riddles surrounding McCandless's case, the allure that it holds for restless young men. The complex bond between fathers and sons, a cherished contemporary classic of investigative journalism into the wild blazes with power and luminosity on every page. I'm ready to read. Let's jump into it. Into the Wild. Author's note. In April 1992, a young man from a well-to-do East Coast family hitchhiked to Alaska and walked alone into the wilderness of Mount McKinley. 4 months later, his decomposed body was found by a party of moose hunters. Shortly after the discovery of the corpse, I was asked by the editor of Outside Magazine to report on the puzzling circumstances of the boy's death. His name turned out to be Christopher Johnson McCandless. Shortly after the discovery of the corpse, I was asked by the editor of Outside Magazine to report on the puzzling circumstances of the boy's death. He'd grown up, I learned, in an affluent suburb of Washington, D.C., where he'd excelled academically and had been an elite athlete. Immediately after graduating with honors from Emory University in the summer of 1990, McCandless dropped out of sight. He changed his name, gave the entire balance of a $24,000 savings account to charity, and abandoned his car and most of his possessions, burned all the cash in his wallet, and then he invented a new life for himself, taking up residence at the Radched ragged margin of our society, wandering across North America in search of raw transcendence experience. His family had no idea where he was or what had become of him until his remains turned up in Alaska. Working on a tight deadline, I wrote a 9,000-word article which ran in the January 1993 issue of the magazine. But my fascination with McCandless remained long after the issue of Outside was replaced on the newsstands by more current journalistic fare. I was haunted by the particulars of the boy's starvation and by vague, unsettling parallels between events in his life and those in my own. Willingly to let McCandless go, I spent more than a year retracing the convoluted path that led to his death in the Alaska taiga, chasing down details of his peregrinations, chasing down details of his peregrinations with an interest that bordered an obsession. In trying to understand McCandless, I inevitably came to reflect on other larger subjects as well. The grip wilderness has on the American imagination, the allure high-risk activities hold for young men of a certain mind, the complicated, highly charged bond that exists between fathers and sons. The result of this meandering inquiry is the book now before you. I won't claim to be an impartial biographer. McCandless's strange tale struck a personal note that made a dispassionate rendering of the tragedy impossible. Through most of the book, I have tried, and largely succeeded, I think, to minimize my authorial presence. is what he found in abundance. Most of the 16-week ordeal, nevertheless, McCandless more than held his own. Indeed, were it not for one or two seemingly significant blunders, he would have walked out of the woods in August 1992 as anonymously as he had walked into them in April. Instead, his innocent mistakes turned out to be pivotal and irreversible. His name became the stuff of tabloid headlines, and his bewildered family was left clutching the shards of a fierce and painful love. A surprising number of people had been affected by the story of Chris McCandless's life and death. In the weeks and months following the publication of the article in Outside, it generated more mail than any other article in the magazine's history. The correspondence, as one might expect, reflected sharply divergent points of view. Some readers admired the boy immensely for his courage and noble ideals. Others fulminated that he was a reckless idiot, a wacko, a narcissist who perished out of arrogance and stupidity, and was undeserved of the considerable media attention he received. My convictions should be apparent soon enough, but I will leave it to the reader to form his or her own opinion of Chris McCandless. This is from Seattle. That's beautiful. It says John Cracker, Seattle, April 1995. The Alaska Interior. This is the last you shall hear from me, Wayne. Arrived here 2 days ago. The Alaska Interior. I love this picture. It's so pretty. I used to live in Washington for 1 month. I lived in Washington for a month. It was beautiful, super green. There was wild berries growing. You can just eat them and pick them for free. questions about the kind of small game that live in the country, the kinds of berries he could eat, that kind of thing. Still, Galleon was concerned. Alex admitted that the only food in his backpack was a 10-pound bag of rice. His gear seemed exceedingly minimal for the harsh conditions of the interior, which in April stayed buried under the winter snowpack. Alex's cheap leather hiking boots were neither waterproof nor well insulated. His rifle was only .22 caliber, a bore too small to rely on if he expected to kill large animals like moose and caribou, which he would have to eat if he hoped to remain very long in the country. He had no axe, no bug dope, no snowshoes, no compass. The only navigational aid in his possession was a tattered state road map he scrounged at a gas station. 100 miles out of Fairbanks, the highway begins to climb into the foothills of the Alaska Range. Alex pulled out his crude map and pointed to a dashed red line and intersected the road near the coal mining town of Healy. It represented a route called the Stampede Trail. Seldom traveled, it isn't even marked on most road maps of Alaska. On Alex's map, nevertheless, the broken line meandered west from the park's highways for 40 miles or so